What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? BizzyDad here, you there, checking out the second deck build of the week. It is Cthulhu week, and I said I wanted to get two deck builds up this week, one for each format of tournament that is available now, both Wanderer and New Frontier. And guys, I said it was coming, and I said I wanted it to be unique, and we are looking at Yog Sothoth right here on the mat as our ruler, and I made it my mission, in a way, to stay off the internet and off other deck build videos to see what anyone else was doing with Yog out of the new set, because I didn't want any ideas floating around in my head. I wanted to try to come up with something unique and original, and I hope I did just that. So any similarities or anything close to something else that might already be out there, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And hey, maybe we should play some games together, because if you came up with something like this, then you're on my wavelength, and that is pretty cool. But here is the profile for the deck I call Yog Smack. This is a black-green moon based deck for Yog. Yet you heard me, black, green, and moon for Yog. So this is definitely an unique twist. There are a lot of cards that work with each other here, and this deck was actually much tougher to build than I thought when it came to Yog. This ruler is really unique, I guess you could say, in the fact that he will destroy anything and anybody, even your own. So to try to take that strategy into consideration and how to use him in the game on both ruler and J ruler side, it really took some thinking, and I hope I came up with something that you guys think would be fun and maybe you could use yourselves or improve on and run it in your own games in tournaments. So let's get into it. Here's our ruler, and I'm sure I'll butcher this, but the ruler's name is Umr At-Tawil, Master of 1,000 Keys. There is no front-facing ability. So as we've seen with Cthulhu's, with Nyarlathotep, no front-facing ability on her side. All the power is on the back. No face, all booty. I said it. And we're going to see the same thing here with Yog. There is no ability, just his energize. So if you are not the player going first, you get a coin or a token or some sort of signal that you get to produce one dark will at any time during the game, and that will is dark. It can't be anything else. So it is pretty handy if you do come in if you do go second in this deck. We don't mind going second at all. In fact, we would prefer it, because we will use the cards we have and the energize to our advantage when necessary. The judgment is one dark plus X, and here is some of the uniqueness, some of the originality. That X could be any number. You pick it. It could even be 0. So you could technically judge and flip over for just one dark. But the X could be any number, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you pay that, he does flip over, and he flips over into Yog Sothoth, the Chaos of 1,000 Doors. 1,500 human Cthulhu J ruler with a limit. So Cthulhu's come in with a limit, and it's kind of a countdown clock. Those limits counters drop every time they attack or block. And Yog, there's a little bit of an extra condition, but once that limit counter hits 0, something happens. So let's go into the card here. The limit is X plus 1. So whatever you paid for in the X in judging, you're going to get a limit counter of X plus 1. So for example, if we judged for dark and 2, if the X was 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, Yog would come in with a limit counter of 3. Whatever that X is, whatever you paid for X, add 1 to it, and that's going to be your limit counter. And whenever this card attacks or blocks, remove a limit counter from it. So that is a normal limit reduction that we see with the Cthulhu's in this new set. At the end of your turn, destroy all resonators with total cost equal to the number of limit counters on this card. Then remove a limit counter from this card. So there are 2 ways, actually 3 ways for Yog to have limit counters removed. Whenever he attacks, you remove one. Whenever he blocks, you remove one. And at the end of every one of your turns, you're going to destroy all resonators with the cost equal to your limit counter, and then you're going to remove another limit counter from it. So if you attack on your turn, you're going to remove a limit counter, and then at the end of your turn, you're going to remove another limit counter. So please keep that in mind. You have to pay attention to what's going on when Yog is on his J-Ruler side. It's very heavily involved J-Ruler. At the beginning of turn, if there are no limit counters on this card, put it into your ruler area as a ruler. And if you do, you have to lose 500 life. So again, it's worth explaining. At the end of your turn, you destroy all resonators equal with the total cost equal to the limit counter. That's only on your turn. But it says at the beginning of turn. So no matter whose turn, if there are 0 limit counters on Yog, he has to flip back over. So at the end of your turn, if you have 1 limit counter on it, you destroy all resonators, total cost 1. You remove a limit counter, which brings him to 0. And then it begins your opponent's turn. So that's at beginning of turn. So you would have to flip Yog back over and lose 500 life. So he is definitely a tough ruler. You have to get used to him. This is not somebody you can just use out of the gate and be like, hey, no problem. I know how to work this. He's really tough, and I had to take that strategy into account when I was trying to build a deck for him. And I hope I did a good job. I hope it's something that you guys like. So let's get into our stone base. I did say it was black-green, and I love my dual stone. So here are 4 copies of the Magic Stone of Black Silence. This is going to give us access to black and green. So always good to have that. I also said it was moon, so it's 3 copies of the Black Moon Memoria. This gives us access to black or moon. And we definitely want to have moons available for us in this deck. We definitely use moons to manipulate our cards and manipulate the game to our advantage. Finally, 3 basic green stones. And I'm thinking of dropping this to 2 only because in my play testing, I've noticed that I'm running into too many of the solo green stones, which isn't a horrible thing, but I would much rather have black and moon to be able to be creative. The basic green is okay. We do have green cards in here, but it's looking like it's going to be a little clunky, so I might drop that down to 2. I'm not 100% sure yet. We'll get into our resonators, and we're going to kick it off with 4 copies of the Moonbreeze Elf. This is a 1-drop, 1 green. It's a 100/400 elf resonator that cannot be attacked, and when you rest it, it produces a moon will. And this is very useful because you're able to produce that on your turn or your opponent's turn when you need to. So really good, cheap, and easy way for us to get access to a moon when we need it, and she can't be attacked. So your opponent can't go after her if she's rested. She's still open to kill spells, but she can't be attacked. So that is pretty good. Keeps her a little safe. We know this guy. It's 4 copies of Creature from Chaos, a 1-drop, 1 dark Cthulhu Resonator, 200/200. And when this card deals damage to a J Resonator, destroy that J Resonator. And we saw that in our other Cthulhu deck for Wanderer. This is a New Frontier format deck, and just in case I didn't mention that in the beginning, the Creature from Chaos, this guy is way more dangerous in this deck, and you're going to see with the other cards to come, the other support cards, he becomes way more dangerous, and we bumped him up to 4 copies in this deck instead of 3 from the last one. So that takes care of our 1-drops, right? So what's the next step? Obviously, we're going to go to our 4-drops, and we have 3 copies of Lucifer, the Fallen Angelic Destroyer. A 4-drop, 2 dark and 2 of any other to play, 900/900 flyer, Angel and Demon Resonator, and this guy's great. When this card enters your field, your opponent banishes a Resonator. So just by coming in, your opponent's got to get rid of somebody. And he does have what's known as a life link for 1 dark and 1 moon. Whenever this card deals damage this turn, you gain that much life. Play this ability only once per turn. So if you have a dark and a moon available after your draw phase, before you recover, you could spend it, give Lucifer that life link. So when he does deal damage, you're going to gain that much life. And also on defense, when it's your opponent's turn and you happen to have a dark and a moon available, you could spend that to give him the life link and block with Lucifer, and the damage that he deals, you're going to gain that much life too. So he is very useful, both offense and defense, just coming in. Really good card, and 3 copies is good enough. How about 2 copies of Azathoth, Hunter of Reality? This guy is a monster. 8 drop, 2 dark, and 6 other. 2000 human Cthulhu Resonator with a limit of 6. So this guy is going to be on the field for a long time. And whenever this card attacks or blocks, remove a limit counter from it. So there we see that mechanic again. Whenever Azathoth attacks or blocks, we're going to drop the limit counter from 6 to 5, 4, 3, 2, all the way down. If this card would be destroyed, you may remove a limit counter from it. Instead, if you do, remove all damage from it. So even if your opponent can kill him, if there's a limit counter that could be spent, you can remove a limit counter. And no, Azathoth is not destroyed. He is still on the field. He just lost the limit counter, but he's still a beast and still alive. Definitely a pain to get rid of. Here, and it gets worse. Whenever this card attacks or blocks, destroy target J Resonator. Unbelievable. So whenever he attacks or blocks, you're going to remove a limit counter from him, and at the same time, you get to destroy a target J Resonator. Now, something to keep in mind is this is not optional. This is mandatory. Whenever Azathoth attacks or blocks, he does have to destroy something. So if your opponent does not have any J Resonators that could be destroyed, you're going to be destroying one of your own guys. So please be careful. Keep that in mind when you're attacking or even blocking with Azathoth. Again, these Cthulhus, the limit and just all the wrinkles really make it tough. You have to think twice before you're making these moves. And so you'll get better by just experience, just by playing with them. At the end of turn, if there are no limit counters on this card, destroy it. If you do, this card deals 2,000 damage to you. That is unbelievable. So really be careful. If Azathoth gets down to 0 and you don't have any way to get rid of him or pump him up or do something else with him, he's going to be destroyed and you're going to take 2,000 damage. And in the middle of the game, towards the end of the game, you might end up killing yourself and causing yourself to lose. So he is great, but he is also dangerous, and you need to be aware of that. Speaking of beasts, 2 copies of the Remote Control Golem, a 10-drop, 2000 Machine Resonator. You may pay 1 less to play this card for each machine you control. This is our only machine in the deck, so we're not worried about that. And this card cannot be destroyed. So just one ultimate weapon, swinging for 2,000, just like Azathoth swings for 2,000. These are home wreckers. These are game enders when they get on the field and they start causing havoc. And it can't be destroyed. So kill spells can't get to it. Damage, if it gets down to 0, it doesn't die. It's still open to banishing and cards that don't target, like this. Oh no, actually no, it wouldn't be that. Destroy all resonators, it wouldn't. It can't be destroyed. But banishing, it's still open to. So be a little bit careful of that, especially if your opponent plays dark cards. He or she, ladies, they might try to get this thing off the field as fast, if possible, and it would definitely be smart for them to do so. So you're looking at these resonators and you're saying, geez, 8-drop Azathoth, 10-drop Golem. How are we going to get these guys on the field? Well, I always like my fun cards. I always like unique twists. And here is one. It's our MVP of the deck. And it's 4 copies of the Shadow Doppleganger. A 4-drop, 1 dark, and 3 of other to play. It's a Shadow Resonator with attack of 0/0. Well, usually if something has 0 defense, they die. But as this card enters your field, you may remove a Resonator in your graveyard from the game. And if you do, this card enters your field as a copy of the card removed that way. So now, Shadow Doppelganger can become Azathoth. Shadow Doppelganger can become Remote Control Golem. Shadow Doppelganger also could become Lucifer if he's in the graveyard. Something to keep in mind, the Shadow Doppelganger does gain the enter effects. So even though Lucifer is a 4-drop, just like the Shadow Doppelganger is, it's not always a bad thing to use him as the copy if in a pinch, because your opponent's going to have to banish a Resonator. Shadow Doppelganger will become Lucifer and get his enter effect. When it becomes Azathoth and Remote Control Golem, it is just insane. And you could get this if you go second with the Energize. If the cards line up right, you can get an Azathoth or a Golem on the field on your third turn. Think about just the gut punch to your opponent. With Energize, if Azathoth or Golem is in the graveyard and on your third turn, you play the Shadow Doppelganger and bring those guys out, it's amazing. So really just a crazy way to get into it. But we do have to make sure that these guys are in the graveyard. We need our support cards to make this line up. We're going to get into it. And let's go to our spells, and let's see. Our number one way to get these guys in here is 4 copies of Soulhunt, which is a spell chant. So you can only do this on your turn. 1 dark to play. Each player banishes a resonator, then each player discards a card. And this is one of our key cards right here. We would love to have this in our hand right away. We can mulligan heavy for it if we don't get it in our opening draw. And it's very beneficial, especially when we go second. If our opponent plays a resonator on their first turn, we come out right out of the gate with Soulhunt. They're going to have to banish that resonator because it's the only one on the board, and they're going to have to discard a card. So the ideal situation is for us to have Soulhunt in our hand from the beginning, play it on our first turn, and the card we discard is Azathoth, or the card we discard is the remote control Golem. And this sets up our graveyard. This puts them in the graveyard, ready to go, and they're going to be right for the pickings for the Shadow Doppelganger. And we just have to make sure she gets in our hand. If we have her from the get-go too, that's amazing. If we don't worry, because we have ways to get her as well. And let's just get right into that, because it is 4 copies of Call of the Primogenitor, a 1-drop instant. So you can do this at any time. And it says put target resonator from your graveyard into your hand, which is a nice ability, but we're focusing on the awakening cost right here. For 1 moon and 1 of other, you get to search your main deck for a darkness resonator, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your main deck. This is a way for us to go get the Shadow Doppelganger if we don't have her in our hand. We can also get Azathoth if we don't have him in our hand. And if we want to go get Lucifer, we can go get him too, or the Creature of Chaos. Any darkness resonator, put it in our hand, and we're using all these cards to help set us up to get the big boys out as early as possible and just start causing havoc. Also, to keep in mind, it says to put target resonator from your graveyard into your hand, which means this must be done. So please be careful. You don't want to play this spell where the only resonator in your graveyard is Azathoth or the Golem, because you're going to have to put them back into your hand. You do not want to do that. So you want to make sure there's at least 1 other resonator in the graveyard for you to put into your hand before you play this card and play the Awakening to go get them. So again, just keep it in mind. The deck is very unique and very colorful in a way, but you do have to get used to it. Here's another unique card. It's the Secluded Elven Village Amonsulle. Might have said that wrong too, but this is from the new set, a 1-drop edition. So this goes into the field, 1 green to play. Elf J Resonators you control gain plus 200 defense, so that's nice. J Resonators your opponent control with flying cannot attack your Resonators. So a nice little bonus. They can't come after you, your Resonators. They'll come after you, but they won't necessarily come after your Resonators. But here's why we have this card, because J Resonators you control can block J Resonators with flying. So all of your J Resonators, all your Resonators, your J Ruler, when this card is on the field, they can fly defensively. And now with this card on the field, how dangerous does a Creature from Chaos become? Because now he can block anybody. And when your opponent has a flyer and thinks that they can get over you to throw in some damage, and now here's the Creature from Chaos coming in who could block flyers and just take them right out. So he's now just all the more dangerous with the ability to fly defensively. We have 3 copies of Wind Secluded Refuge, which is a really cool card. It's another field edition, so it's 2 drop, 1 green and 1 other to play. When this card enters your field, draw a card. So we get some draw power. When a spell or ability your opponent controls targets a J Resonator you control, you may banish this card. And if you do, you cancel that spell or ability. When you play with cards like Black Moonbeam that says players cannot chase to the card, Wind Secluded Refuge gets around it because but it all has to be on the field. Keep that in mind. It is not automatic. You don't automatically banish this card. It's a choice. So if your opponent plays a spell targeting one of your J Resonators and you don't want to cancel it, you don't have to banish the card. If you want to cancel it, you banish the Wind Secluded Refuge card. And it does cancel Black Moonbeam. It does get around that because this does not go on the chase. This is already on the field, and it's a choice you make. No, I don't want to cancel that. Yeah, I want to cancel that. Banish it. And so this is a protection card for RJ Resonators to keep them on the field, something maybe for Azathoth or the Golem or even Yog when we turn him over. So good little protection spell and a free draw, so that's good too. Speaking of Black Moonbeam, we got 3 copies of that in here. So it's a 2-drop instant, 2 dark, you can play at any time, and you destroy target J-Ruler. Players cannot chase to this card, so the only way to get around it is with the Wind Secluded Refuge, or if it's something where your opponent's J-Ruler has Imperishable built in, or was able to get them Imperishable before you played this card. This is in the deck because we might get our opponent trapped to where they might think their only move is to J-activate and bring their J-Ruler out, hopefully earlier than they wanted to. And then once they do, we just slap this card on them and they just take all the wind out of their sails if they have no way to prevent their J-Ruler from dying. We also have 2 copies of the Pitch Black Moon, and this is kind of insurance. It's another field edition. Your J-Ruler gains +2/+2 as long as it's dark. That's good. Yog is dark. But for a moon, if we spend a moon and discard a Resonator, we could put another target Resonator from our graveyard into our hand. So if we can't get our hands on Soulhunt, but we have the Pitch Black Moon, we can play that. And so let's say we have an Azathoth in our hand. We got to get it into the graveyard. It's really no good in our hand. But a Moonbreeze Elf is in our graveyard. If we have a moon to spend, we can take the elf back into our hand and put Azathoth in our graveyard, and boom, there he is. Now he's where we want him to be in order to pull him out with the Shadow Doppelganger. So you can see how these cards work hand in hand with each other, and they really work well together. It's a lot of different options, so your opponent doesn't know exactly what to stop because you can plug one hole, but we can just come through another. So definitely makes it interesting. Another interesting card is 3 copies of Gleipnir, the Red Binding of Fate. This is our only Regalia in the deck, and it costs 0, so we can just put it right onto the field. Whenever your J-Ruler deals battle damage to your opponent or another J-Ruler, you draw a card, so good way to draw some power. If you discard another card named Gleipnir, you also get to draw a card. So 2 ways we get to draw with this card. But the main ability, the money, is resting it, because if you rest it, target J Resonator your opponent controls gains this turn. This card must block if able. And then there's more text for Valentina because this is her Regalia, but we're using with Yog, so we're not worried about that. So basically what this card does is it forces one of our opponent's J Resonators to block this turn. And we love making our opponent's J-Ruler have to block, and then we attack with the Creature from Chaos, because whenever he deals damage to a J Resonator, that J Resonator is destroyed. So between the Elf Village, making him able to block flyers, and Gleipnir making us force our opponents to block his attacks, Creature from Chaos becomes unbelievably dangerous, like I've said the whole way from this deck. So as you can see, it is really a deck that works well. There are a lot of different options. And before, I just want to go back to Yog a little bit. The reason why we go from 1-drop Resonators to 4-drop Resonators is that Yog is our 2-drop and 3-drop control. We will judge with him if our opponent is getting a little too full of themselves on the board. We can flip him over for 3, 1 dark and 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. He'll get 3 limit counters on him and then just pass the turn. All the 3-drops get destroyed. We don't have any, so we're not worried about that. Even when the limit counter gets dropped down to 2, destroy all the 2-drops. That's fine. We don't have any. And we can just keep our opponent's board controlled somewhat with Yog. We can also attack and block with Yog. He's a 1500. If we have Gleipnir, we can force one of our opponent's J Resonators to block and swing with Yog and all that fun stuff too. I'm still working on the sideboard. It is situational, but I just wanted to show some cards that could work in here. 3 copies of Resonance of Madness. It's a 1-drop chant. You can only do this on your turn, and as an additional cost, you have to banish a Resonator. And so this card and banishing a Resonator will destroy one of your opponent's Resonators. This is kind of an insurance policy for Azathoth. If we're getting our limit counters down and we don't have any way to get him off the board, we can play this and banish him and avoid having to destroy him and taking that 2,000 hit. 3 copies of Heavenly Gust, another card from the new set, and it is a quick cast chant, so you can play this whenever you want. And you can choose to either destroy a target edition or Regalia at any time. That's good. But it has Torrent, which makes it even better. If it's the second card you played on your turn, you get to destroy all additions and resonators your opponent controls. So keep this in the sideboard if you go up against somebody who's heavy on additions and Regalia. And then when it's your turn, if you have it in your hand, you could play a card like the Moonbreeze Elf or even a Gleipnir for free. Bring out Heavenly Gust second, and all resonators and additions are gone from your opponent's side, which is really good. 3 copies of Keen Sense, spell chant instant again. So 1 green and 1 other, and you get to cancel a target normal spell. So you can't cancel summons, but if your opponent is spell heavy, here's a good way to pop them, and they wouldn't expect it. Or you could destroy a target card in a chant standby area. So you go up against somebody who's spamming those Croco Sharks. Here's a way to kind of slow them down a little bit, just pop them off one at a time. We also have 3 copies of Adomberly. He's our utility Cthulhu. He goes in all over the place. Again, we have him just for the incarnating and for Azathoth in case we need to get him off the board. Also, whenever you incarnate Dark, your opponent loses 400 life. So, I mean, why not? Just have him just in case. And finally, one other fun card is the Hunter of Souls. It's a 3-drop resonator, 1 dark and 2 of any other, 700, 700. And whenever a resonator is put into a graveyard from your opponent's field, this card deals 200 damage to your opponent and you gain 200 life. When we have cards like Gleipnir that's going to force our opponents to block, and we have cards like Creature from Chaos and Lucifer and Azathoth, that all these resonators going into our opponent's graveyard through the game, having the Hunter of Souls out there is pretty cool because you're going to gain life and your opponent's going to eat damage just for having resonators go in the graveyard. So again, just a little fun card, a little fun twist. You know I like to put them in my deck. So guys, that is it. The deck profile for Yog Smack. It is Yog out of the new set, and I'm so glad I got him because I love Cthulhu's, and I was really pumped to be able to build a deck for him. And I really wanted to put something different and unique together. So I'm sorry this video is a little bit on the long side with everything drawn out, but I want to know what you think. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Let me know with a comment below. Like, share, subscribe, and I always have more videos on the way. So guys, as always, thank you for a few minutes, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.